Alexa currently understands only 8 languages, and they want to scale this up to 50 and potentially 100.
The entire linguist network, they say, is made up of lawyers.
And welcome to another episode of Slator Pod. Hi there, Esther.
Hey, Florian.
This is a very special episode. So this is an ending of sorts and a beginning of sorts.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break from Slator and Slator Pod. I was going to dive into some sort of analogy about how I've been working on a personal project in stealth mode for about the past 9 months. But yeah, I couldn't quite make it work. So anyway, I will be going off on maternity leave and expecting, my first child in the next couple of weeks. So I'll miss everybody audience-wise, and also doing pod every week. But I will return.
I guess it's stealth if you're in a remote-only world.
Exactly, yeah. It's ready for its, public beta, public launch.
Before we move the analogy further, we head over to our usual language industry coverage. So we got a lot to talk about in this final episode before the big break. And to the listeners, we'll still see how we continue the pod. Definitely, we're going to continue the guest episodes. Probably going to bring other people from the Slater team on to do the news wrap. But we already have a few guest episodes scheduled. So don't worry, the pod will continue, and then Esther is going to be back in a few months from now. So you'll see. Hey, today we'll talk about Netflix and streamers, Amazon, and more languages coming to Alexa. Big buying Lawlinguists, Seprotec buying TSD, and Transifex has a new owner as well. So let me get started on the Netflix just very briefly. I mean, we usually when these big streamers announce results, we're going to try and find out more about how their localization efforts are going, right? Because they're obviously sucking up a lot of market resources with all the dubbing and subtitling that's going on. Now, yesterday was a bit of a bad day for Netflix and for anybody who is invested in Netflix. Their stock tanked by like 35% after they announced that they actually, for the first time in history, lost subscribers instead of growing. So everybody kind of has this perpetual growth trajectory for them, and they lost subscribers. I think it was kind of minuscule. It was like 200,000.
200,000, yeah. And there was some kind of some caveat around, well, if you count Russia, then it's... because I think they've sort of removed Russia from the list of countries that can access it. So there was like some kind of figure of thing where if you don't count Russia, then basically they did add 500,000 or something.
Yeah, and then they also had this whole thing around kind of password sharing, which is a problem. Like if 100 million people share the password.
They're doing to try and clamp down on it, aren't they? Like no longer enable sharing across households or something, or different households.
Yeah. So from a lock perspective, not much that we disclose. We're going to write a quick piece about it. By the time we're talking about this, we haven't published it. So, I mean, generally, they continue to push the global content angle, of course, because I mean, if you're completely maxed out in the US, the only growth that's left is global, right? Is international, as the Americans say. So, in other markets, potentially, Southeast Asia, India, etc. And so Ted Sarandos, Chief Content Officer, co-CEO, said, our ability to bring global notoriety to local content players is unprecedented and it's pretty unrivaled at this point, giving examples of Squid Game and Lupin, meaning a lot of into English dubbing and subtitling as well. So, as they're scouring the globe for content, they also want to bring it back to the US and the UK, etc. So that demand isn't going to dry up. They also, now moving on to the gaming side of things, I think that's fascinating, right? So we also looked at the earnings call transcript, and the Reed Hastings, CEO and founder, he said that they're building capacity in gaming faster than they did when they entered Phil. They said they built a big capacity to be able to provide our members or their members with interactive and gaming experience. So gaming, another franchise another business they want to ramp up, and they're ramping up. We spoke about, I think, in a previous pod about the new roles they're hiring, or we published a piece, I don't recall. The COO said it's a top priority for them, gaming that is, and they're very focused on it. We want to ramp and scale the investment open to building organically and M&A. So anybody who's in gaming, again, this is a good time. If you want to sell your business, potentially you can exit it to Netflix. So not bad. And they say they're learning more and more every day from the licensed titles that they've got, etc. Long story short, gaming a big strategic priority for Netflix, probably even more so now that the growth is really stalling in kind of the core geographies, right? So from a localization point of view, not necessarily bad news, because, well, I mean, you're going to have to go global even more, which means more subbing, more subtitling, more dubbing. And, if you're in gaming, there's a big new potential client for your game lock. Yeah, also, I mean, Disney, we parsed, they also spoke about it in their last earnings call. It's already two months ago. I mean, they're also pushing, of course. I mean, part of the reason why Netflix is struggling, because, you got Prime, you got HBO Max, you got Disney, you got Apple, you got every big company there just chasing that streaming dollar, and they're also absorbing a lot of capacity from a localization point of view. So for the industry as a whole, it's a good thing. For I guess our industry, it's a good thing. Moving on to a company that does content, but also publishes giant data sets for language understanding, Amazon.
Yeah. What's Amazon doing?
What is Amazon doing? I asked myself when this story appeared on our editorial radar this morning. So the headline is Amazon releases 51 language data set for language understanding. And we haven't had a lot of time to unpack this, but I still wanted to bring it up on the pod today. So basically, Alexa currently understands, quote unquote, only 8 languages, and they want to scale this up to 50 and potentially 100, or, whatever the marketing thing is, like every language under the sun. So they created and now open sourced a huge language set for language understanding that people can build upon, right? So Alexa can understand more languages. They call it massive, a massive data set for a massively multilingual NLU. Again, this is basically just helping Alexa understand more humans on the planet in more low-resource languages, away from just English, Spanish, German, Chinese, etc. And what's really interesting in this is that they said that they created this giant. What are the numbers here?
1 million utterances.
1 million utterances
per language.
Per language. So they created this 1 million utterances per language data set by tasking professional translators, they say, to localize and translate the English-only data set into 50 typologically diverse languages, including low-resource languages. That's a big project.
I guess it's 1 million per language. I mean, it says 1 million spanning 51 languages, or I suppose into 50 languages, including the English source. But even so, it's a huge undertaking, right, to translate that amount of.
Do you mean it's 51 million utterances eventually in all, or is it just 1 million across? Oh, spanning.
I don't really know from the wording whether it means 1 million utterances per language or 1 million utterances overall.
If they call it massive, it would have to be 1 million per. So, well, I would say let's check back in and correct ourselves in the next pod, but you're not going to be here. So if I remember, I'll fact check.
I can say anything I like at this point because you can't correct me. But anyway, I mean, they're translating, if nothing else, using professional translators into 50 languages, which is, that's a big task.
18 domains, 16 intents, 55 slots, whatever that means. Long story short, somebody got a giant job from Amazon to get this done if they say professional translators, so that probably didn't source those translators on their own. And yeah, now, the developers are off and can develop whatever Alexa needs to understand those 50 languages. So good stuff. We'll follow up on, I want to understand if this is 50 million like per or across, right? I think it's per.
I mean, it does say every utterance is given in all 51 languages.
Yeah, so it's probably that. Yeah. Back to the more familiar shores of language industry mergers and, crucially, acquisitions. So who bought whom and what did we learn about it?
Who bought whom? Yeah, so a few stories to share this week on the M&A front. A couple of them, I think were announced probably last week, but we were busy talking about our market report and a couple of other M&A stories to really talk about these last week. So we had, I think, announced on the 12th of April, Big Language Solutions acquired Lawlinguists. So Lawlinguists is a legal translation specialist that is based in Italy. So interestingly, I quite like this. It was founded by, I mean, it's so specialist. I don't think you could get more specialist than this, just looking at sort of the way that they're talking about it. So it's founded by 3 attorneys just over a decade ago. The entire linguist network, they say, is made up of lawyers, which is pretty impressive to find, that many lawyers willing to work as translators, I suppose, solely. But they're covering 100 language pairs with their linguist network of lawyers. And that, I think, is really what they're kind of hammering as their USP and sort of niche in the legal space. They work mainly with clients in Italy, Germany, UK, including law offices, multinational corporations, and public institutions. So interesting acquisition for Big. I mean, obviously, may remember Big has done several other acquisitions in the past couple of years, backed by their private equity backers, South. So this really represents an expansion into the European market, or more of an expansion into both, regulated markets, this kind of critical content that they are actively trying to pursue. They also acquired here in the UK Dora Wirth Languages just under a year ago in 2021. So that was a life sciences specialist. So kind of more of those critical content niches that they're now diving into. So, I mean, originally I think they started off by acquiring Pro Translating in the US, as well as ISI, which was a healthcare specialist, and an OPI provider called Language Link. Those are the US-based acquisitions, and now we're seeing more happening in Europe. So Jeff Brink told us that the revenue for 2022 is projected to come in at around $90 million now. Moving forward, they're looking to use the sales team to expand the legal translation sector, work across Europe and also across the US. Sort of tucked in another little announcement, I think, with this news that the plan is to rebrand everything, so all of those acquired companies, under a Big Language master brand by the end of 2022. So that was the first of the M&As.
That's going to keep them busy, the whole rebranding. Quite interesting. I always like when they rebrand. I always like when it's under one roof. I think these conglomerates can get
You don't like a such and such company model?
I don't know. Why?
I think in the short term, I suppose it's easier, and don't want to give clients a fright and all this sort of thing. You can't be ready with the design work like day one of the acquisition, can you?
No, but I mean, how big of a brand was SDL, and how fast are people forgetting about SDL just because it's now part of RWS? No, I mean, it's true, isn't it? It's sad but true.
Yes.
It's sad but true. So, and it's just easier to manage it. So anyway. Now, who's next? Next is our friends in España who went to Alemania.
Well, I like this story. This was Seprotec that's acquired TSD. So this in Seprotec's first acquisition since they themselves were majority acquired by private equity last year. So Seprotec, as you said, a Spain-based LSP. Reasonably sizable now, so they generated, I think, just over $60 million in 2021, making them one of the top 25 LSPs globally, according to our index. So they've acquired German language service provider TSD, which is based in Cologne. has a branch in Berlin and has around 80 employees. So roughly, we don't know the exact size of TSD because they declined to participate in the LSPI this year, but last year, 2021, they did participate based on 2020 revenues when they generated 9 million euros, so around $11 million in 2020. So it's for Seprotec expansion into German-speaking region, so the DACH region.
They have a presence. They have a presence here in Basel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In Switzerland, they were talking about that as well, saying that they I think started building that out a few years ago, but that German-speaking market is strategically important for them. Seprotec has one of its main sectors is IP. Intellectual property, and they say that there's a good opportunity for IP in the German-speaking markets, and that this is really the first step in the kind of they're already international, but it's sort of first acquisition in what will probably be more international expansion moving forward. TSD, so I mean, it's sort of typical, what we think of as sort of like typical Germany, typical German-speaking clients, where you've got engineering, manufacturing sectors heavily represented, so automotive, energy and construction customers. They also do some life sciences and finance. Was owned by a family, so one of, kind of few privately owned companies, I suppose, left, somewhat smaller than Seprotec. But yeah, TSD was owned by the Freibot family since 1987, so for the past 35 years.
It's interesting because that Seprotec was also family owned.
Yes, I think when we published the piece, we made that parallel as well. They actually share sort of a similar period in history under private ownership.
This helps to relate, right? When you start these discussions and common journey, common kind of dynamics there. So, yeah.
Well, and you've got the CEO and founder of Seprotec, Juan Julian Leon, who is still leading the company as CEO even after the private equity investment in 2021. Likewise, the two people who are at the helm of TSD. So you had Dominique Puls and her husband Stefan, who are at the helm of TSD, also joining Seprotec as sort of MDs of the German subsidiary as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens there, and also what Seprotec does next.
Let's go all the way to California, where Transifex sold to PARC Partners. What is PARC Partners?
Yeah, I wasn't super aware of this kind of model actually prior to this announcement, but PARC Partners is what you call a search fund, or at least what they call a search fund. So not kind of typical private equity that maybe would have an expansive portfolio in language services, in other business services or healthcare or whatever. PARC Partners is a search fund, and they were looking for one business specifically to own and operate. PARC Partners itself is actually backed by institutional or financial investors. There's kind of several layers of things happening there. But basically the managing partners, Reese and Tony Pilnik, so the managing partners of PARC Partners, are going now to be essentially taking over management of Transifex as CEO and president respectively. So it's what it is. It's kind of private equity at the base, or at the kind of foundation of this, teaming up with some entrepreneurs or seasoned kind of management professionals, i.e. Reese and Tony Pilnik, to take over and lead and run an organization. So that's what's happening here.
And for those few who don't know Transifex, because we kind of led on the deal structure and ownership, I mean, what is it? What is it? What did they buy?
Yeah, what did they buy? Well, so Transifex is continuous localization. That's their niche. They are pure play technology, and they focus on software and digital content. So they offer a SaaS platform model for website, mobile, app, and game localization. They provide integration, workflow automations, and they're really specifically focused on the area of supporting agile design and development processes. So all the kind of I don't want to say modern tools, but tools that people use in development of today's software. So that is Transifex. I mean, I think they've scaled somewhat, although we don't know the exact sort of ARR or revenues at the moment. But they did go through 2 previous funding rounds in 2014, 2015. So raised prior to this $6.5 million. But I mean, some kind of indication is that PARC, at least on their website, said they were looking for a service or product with ARR, annual recurring revenue of at least 5 million, profit of at least $1.5 million. So gives you at least some kind of minimum threshold for Transifex there, given that it's pure software. If they're disciplined, for sure. But they did say that Transifex grew 35% in 2021 last year. They have around 55 employees, mostly based in Greece, but also they kind of got their corporate headquarters in California, in the US.
Well, congrats to Dimitris. Great story. Founded it, ran it, sold it. All right, that concludes this segment. And no guest this week, but exciting guest next week. So maybe you'll check in on the next podcast.
Yeah, I'll probably flip over to the other side and become a listener and/or watcher. Let's see.
Hopefully. All right. Thanks, everyone.